Welcome to the HEM webinar. We're just getting started over here. I can see more people are still trickling in, so we'll go a little slow for the first couple slides here as this room fills up. So the topic of today's webinar is landing pages in paid advertising, best practices for student recruitment. So I'll be your sole presenter today. My name is Alexander Nachaj. I'm the director of paid ads and analytics over here at HEM. So my team is really the ones that look under anything related to paid ad campaign on Google, on Meta, as well as we do a lot of work on the landing pages, as well as the tracking and ROI measurements of campaigns we do with our clients. So a quick run through of our agenda today. So there's a couple parts to our presentation. Probably the bulk of it will be the first two items here, where we're talking about components of a landing page, as well as the best practices for these landing pages. I'm also get into discussing a bit about the importance of tracking, to really improve your ROI. As well, we're going to have a very short section at the end, just about some considerations for international recruitment and what you might want to do with the landing pages if you're marketing to audiences, that are not local, but from another country. And finally, just a few reminder takeaways and a little piece of housekeeping. So in our webinar here today, we have the option to ask questions and I can answer them at the end. So if you have questions along the way, I believe it should be the top panel of your screen. There's a Q&A button. You can use that to type in your questions. It can be at any point during our talk today, and that'll appear right at the end. So before we get into the topic itself, just want to have a quick poll. Do you use landing pages instead of program pages for your campaigns? So that should be popping up and you'll have the chance to answer. So basically, yes, you always use landing pages. No, you actually use program pages as the destination for your campaigns. Or even, are there any differences between the two? So no worries if you're picking A, B, or C. These are pretty much things we're going to jump into in our discussion today. So I'll let you all have maybe just a couple more seconds to answer. I see a lot of people already have, and that's great. And this should be just about good enough. And let's see the results. So about half of you, yes, in fact, do use landing pages for your campaigns. About 25% do not. You probably maybe you're using either no pages or program pages, and then another quarter asking about the difference. So I guess the surprise ending of today is that ideally A is the best route to be going for your campaigns. But we're also really going to talk about how to make these landing pages stronger, why you should use them, and also get into some of the differences between a landing page and a program page and how they should ideally be used. So just another little detail before we get into our topic of landing pages. So just the topic of landing pages itself, where it sort of fits. So this is part of, I guess, an ongoing discussion in paid advertising, which we've had in some past webinars and probably talked about on our blog as well, if you keep track of a lot of our media. So our discussion of landing pages today is really very relevant, I find, largely because of some changes that have happened in the way digital marketing is operated, maybe in this case over the past decade, but even more so over the past couple of years. So one consideration to keep in mind is that, 10, 15 years ago, most traffic was on desktop. Today, mobile phone is by and large the most used device that people access the web with. That includes in terms of clicking on advertisements, filling in forms, and viewing landing pages. So really, one of the things to keep in mind is that mobile first is very important from designing any, marketing material, including a landing page. Also that there's a big change pre and post COVID, how people interact with the web itself. Beforehand, people were much more straightforward. It was almost a bit of an easier game back then. You have an ad, goes to a page, people fill in the form, and that was that. After COVID, what we see is that people are a lot more fickle. If they get to a page and it doesn't serve their needs, there's a good chance they're going to bounce immediately and maybe find what they're looking for on a competitor's site. So there's a lot of need to have very, modern, up-to-date materials that are very to the point. On the one hand, it's also expected that even if a visitor does see your landing page, they might also go and check out your social media pages, your website, and then back to your landing page. So people's journeys are a lot more scattered than they used to be. But also their expectations are very high. And this is also not just users' expectations, but during the COVID pandemic, the number of organizations, educational institutions that went from not having any online presence to having one exponentially jumped. So maybe at one point you were the only one amongst your competitors that had a strong online presence, but most likely they all do now. So there's really the need to use your assets in the best way possible. We can't really just wing it like we used to. There's a lot more competition out there as well these days. And so let's get into our discussion of a landing page. So when we talk about landing pages, these landing page at a sort of very basic nature is the first page on your site that a visitor is going to be going to. So, I mean, if you use Google Analytics, you'll probably see the word landing page. It could be referring to organic traffic. If they find a blog in Google, the landing page, quote unquote, could be your blog page. But when we're talking about them here for more marketing campaigns, for paid ads campaigns, a landing page, we like to discuss it as very much a standalone page that is pretty much the only page they're going to view after they click that ad and come to your site. And these should be very self-contained. And there's going to be a lot of elements to them that'll be similar, but also different from some of your other pages. And so when we make landing pages for paid ad campaigns, usually it's for a specific objective. And I outlined 3 of them here. The most common one that we use in education would be for lead generation. So this means that when a person clicks an ad or a link and comes to this page, the primary purpose of this page is to generate a lead for your admissions team. So you want them to fill in that RFI form, and everything about the page should be geared towards that end goal right there. That's by and large the most common one that we use. Leads are obviously very good to have, especially if you have a good call center or admissions team and so forth. It's one of the steps along the way, the funnel of turning a prospect into an enrolled student. Other things that landing pages could also be used for could be for event registration. We've had success doing these for open houses. Could be things even like a meet the staff barbecue in the summer, campus tours. You can even use this if your school is hosting a webinar or a workshop. So these are other, things that we've done there. You still collect the lead for an open house, but it also has this extra offer that if you become an open house lead, you're also hoping they're going to show up to visit the campus and move a bit further down that way. And lastly, so there's also landing pages for application forms. So we don't usually discuss application landing pages as, the first thing or the only thing you should do, even if an application is obviously a stronger signal from a prospective student than just becoming a lead is. The reason for this, that applications is usually a higher ask. You might have 3, 4, 5 pages of things they got to fill in. Not everybody wants to do that at the first go. But a cool thing you do with landing pages that are about applications is if you remarket to those leads that maybe didn't really follow through your funnel, you could always start sending those same visitors to this new landing page, which is for the application, as a way to kind of nudge them along. So events and applications are useful, but by and large, what today we'll be talking about will be the lead generation type of landing page. And so when we talk about landing pages, there's really 2 sides to it. There's the front end, which is what your visitors see, the people interacting with it, your prospective students. And then there's the back end, which is a lot of the technology that, really ties the pieces together and helps put these leads down further into your funnel. So on a typical landing page, there's a few components you'd want to have to it. I mean, one would be a compelling headline. It could be reiterating the program or the offer, some key USP. It's important these days to have a hero section, so a big banner section with visuals, whether it's a static image or a video, depending on the capabilities of your landing page. People really like visuals, and they tend to engage well if the visuals are strong. And I guess like a tidbit about this. So we've done lots and lots of A/B tests over the past year about what type of visuals tend to work the best for most educational programs. And almost every time it's going to be a picture of a student, a real student, not a stock photo, probably on campus, looking fulfilled, content, studying, anything like that. If you have very high quality real photos, if you did a photo shoot at your campus, those tend to work the best. People like authenticity, they can relate to it. And seeing other humans, is a lot more easy to connect with than if it's just a picture of your school's logo on the side of the building or something like that. On these pages, you'd also want to have subheaders, outline other key elements or key offers about your program. You definitely want to have very concise copy here. So this is one thing we'll talk bunch about today. So maybe on some pages on your website, you want to have a lot of text, a lot of content, a lot of copy. On a landing page, short and sweet is generally the way you want to go. You want to be very clear, very concise, because people don't show up to these pages to read a novel. They really just want the information and time to make a decision. Having testimonials and endorsements are great for trust signals. A few other key program details, maybe the stylized and little icons would be good. And as further away you get down the fold, it's really good to have CTAs that take the user back up to the form. Because the last thing you want them to do is not notice the form, which in many ways is probably one of the most important things on this page. So you really want a very clear, easy to notice form, and ideally in a very visually, noticeable place. You don't want to tuck that form at the bottom of your page where nobody finds it, because the more scrolling that's involved, the more likely somebody's going to drop off. And that's actually something we've seen a lot when we've done heat map tests. Sort of every page length from that first view down, you're going to lose 10 or 20% of your traffic, and the form is all the way at the bottom. You might be losing out on 9 out of 10 visitors to that site just because they either can't find it, or they don't bother scrolling down, or they don't realize your form is even there. And the other half of a landing page is also what goes on in the back end. So there's a few processes that people who are interacting with it probably won't see. One, you'd want to have this redirection ideally set up so that when somebody fills in the form, it sends them to a thank you page. There's a lot of things you can do when a form's filled out. It could either be, a thank you message or whatnot, but I'll talk a bit more later about why a thank you page is probably the way you want to go. You also want to make sure that's integrated with your CRM, whatever database you use for your leads. It can be something as simple as a Google Sheet where your sales team just kind of reviews and calls. But ideally, a CRM is where you want to be to really score and track your leads and use that data to further optimize your campaigns and your landing page. And then as long as your whatever process you use, it doesn't just, have, like a red line or blue line. You obviously just want to have as much information on your leads and where they drop off as possible, because all this sort of funnel that they go through once they become a lead, it can really get a lot of data here that'll actually affect the way we might want to optimize and further test our landing page as we go along. So let's get into some best practices for landing pages. Probably the first thing to bear in mind is that kind of going back to our poll, that a landing page is not a program page, and we shouldn't be using it for the same purpose. So program pages and landing pages are both really essential to have, but they fundamentally have different purposes and are meant to interact with different audiences. So a program page should be on your main website. It should be linked to everything else, probably nestled under the rest of your programs. If you have a lot, put them all there. There's going to be links on your page that go maybe to your About Us and other sections, tons of information and all that. And that's fantastic because program pages are really good organic traffic generators so that people typing in Google that don't click an ad can find it fairly easily. And usually the people that find a program page are in sort of the information gathering stage of their journey. So these are students that still want more information about program types, about schools, about offerings, maybe even where to study, what to study, things like that. And your program page can really have as much information there as possible. It can have all kinds of CTAs, talk about campus tours, visits, everything under the sun can be there. Let them explore to their heart's content. Landing page is fundamentally different because when we use landing pages, they're usually attached to paid ad campaigns. And when you have a well-optimized paid ad campaign, you're not really trying to hit, pay for clicks for people that haven't made up their mind about studying yet. You're really just trying to get clicks for people who are in market. So people who are ready to take the next step, to become a lead, to apply, hopefully enroll, and so forth. So the people that hit a landing page are usually much more focused on what to do next. And we want to make your landing pages clear and pointed towards that action, which in most cases is the RFI form to become a lead. Or on your program page, you'll still probably have an RFI form, but it might not be, as optimized for that, just based on the different stage of these different students. And so where a program page is really fine to have lots of menu links that go all over the place, because, the more time they spend on your site, the more they gather about you as they start to make up their mind. On a landing page, we really don't want anything that could divert a visitor's attention away from the form and away from that one action that we want them to complete. So if you have a menu on the top of your landing page, you should probably get rid of that because every one of those is a click that could take them away from this action, because the student who showed up is probably already in market, but if we distract them, they might forget, they might come back later, do another Google search. The next thing you know, they hit a competitor's website who does not distract them, and that's where the lead information goes. You also probably don't want to put in a ton of CTAs here for different actions. Usually a landing page works best when it's really just about one action. So if you have a lot of other buttons and highlights and shiny things to distract them, make sure it just pushes them all back to this form. It could be an anchor that just returns the form to the screen or something like that. On mobile phones, it could be a little sticky thing at the bottom that anytime they click it, it always opens the form. In some cases, we've done discussions and talks that it's sometimes okay to have an application button on the form as well. But again, it really depends on your school, and it's worth testing whether you want to have anything like that on there. Because again, you don't want to detract from the purpose of your page, which is get as many leads as possible, especially if you're paying money into your paid ads campaign. You want to have the highest possible conversion rate for your forms, which is the highest possible return on your investment. Following what I was just talking about, it's really good to have a focused action. So everything in your page should really be focusing towards this goal. So in this case, RFI form. And some of the ways that you might want to look into this, I mean, there's different softwares you can use, for instance, things like Crazy Egg or Hotjar or heat maps. So we've seen this on a lot of tests that we've done also installing heat maps. Sometimes just the way your page is outlined, it's not always clear, what they should be getting out of this form. I mean, in this case, it's nice. It says program brochure. It could probably still be accentuated a bit, like have that button say, download my brochure, request my brochure. So you might end up finding things if you use heat map to see what part of the text people spend a lot of time on. Maybe they spend too much time on information that's not relevant. So there's a lot of testing and viewing you can do with your analytics to really, again, try to funnel everybody towards this action you want. Because again, if you're paying money for your paid ads or hitting this page not filling it out, you're not getting a good return on your investment, because landing pages are really there as the capstone of your campaigns. Another important point is about maintaining consistency. So ideally, your landing page should be an extension of your existing marketing efforts. I mean, it should look in some sense similar to your main web page or your brand and so forth, particularly if you're a more established school that, people recognize, a color associated with you. It should be here. And one reason why we like to bring this up is that often what we see with a lot of schools is that probably year one, you have your website up, but maybe depending on the size of your school, you don't have landing pages or a full marketing team in yet. Maybe you even have not a lot of resources for this. So sometimes when we work with schools, we see that they do have landing pages, but they look utterly nothing like the rest of their brand. Like maybe there's the logo there and nothing else. So ideally, the closer it is to your brand, the better. One that, not just is it consistent, but it's also sort of a trust signal. When people see this and then your website, they know it's associated with you. Because there's probably nothing worse than having a very great website and a very good campaign, but your landing page looks like it was designed by the janitor's brother or somebody, and it just doesn't gel, and maybe doesn't have the right trust signals there for somebody to have a lot of confidence in it. And one of the, I guess, the compounding factors for this is, again, a lot of schools that don't have the resources. There's free or inexpensive landing page builders out there. There's things like Unbounce and all that. But a lot of the time, getting those to look visually similar to your school is a little tricky. So maybe they'll just be like the wrong looking image. The texts are different, colors are different. So you might need a lot of work, but it's really worth it when you put the effort in to make this landing page look like it's part of your brand. Next is about maintaining conciseness. So like I said before, a program page is good to fill with as much information as you can, because again, those are sort of organic traffic magnets. A landing page, you want to be as clear as possible. So again, this goes with our no distractions, funnel people towards the goal. And it's really good to have, a good use of headlines, subheaders, small bits of text here, icons, little highlights. And you can see on this page here, there's a clear CTA. There's a lot of text and all that, but it's not distracting, because at the end of this, you're still seeing the CTA that they want you to click on. So it's a really effective way of getting your message across if you use text and bullets and things in a very nice, visually appealing manner without, there's nothing worse than seeing like a big block of text that comes out of a novel in the middle of your page, because people just won't read that. We know this for a fact when all the tests and analytics we've run on landing pages, people look for a few key things. They really want their eyes to go to these bubbles here and there and the form, and that's pretty much it. So back to the form, probably one of the most important things is to make sure your forms are visible and accessible, like I talked about earlier. The further down on the page it is, the more likely nobody's going to see it. So in the best of all cases, you'd want this to be visible as soon as somebody lands on the page. It shouldn't be the only thing they see, But for instance, if you have your computer monitor for a desktop or laptop, it should be visible when the page loads. And ideally have this the same thing, maybe the lower half of your screen on a mobile phone, or at least have a button that really, they can see this button is very clear. When it clicks, it goes to that form. And again, when this is optimized, when this form is very visible and easy to get to, you're going to see the conversion rates on your page go up than if you didn't have this in there as well. And I guess another thing with the form is ideally it should visually stand out. In some cases, we've seen where the form and the text kind of blend together, so it doesn't really, it's not very well highlighted. It's good to maybe have a border around it, a box, very bright CTA button for the submit, have all the fields very clear as well, also help. And in terms of optimizing your form, I guess there's two real ways you can go about this. The form is really what, people interact with, they engage with it, fill in the information to submit. And what pretty much all data shows is that the fewer fields on a form are going to lead to higher conversion rates. So obviously, if you just ask for your email, it's very quick and simple to put that in. You get tons and tons of leads, quote unquote, with just an email coming in. It's very easy to fill it in. It might even be auto-selected on people's phones. So leads, first name, stuff like that, emails, first name, very easy. A lot of people coming in. Some problems with that, though, is that you might just be getting too much junk in there. A lot of time when people autofill, you're going to have just maybe it's the wrong person in the household, or maybe they didn't really read through the information, all that. Maybe they weren't very committed. So if you get a form that's way too easy to fill, you might get a lot more junky leads in there, which can cause problems for your admissions team if you don't have enough bandwidth to answer, 10 times as many leads as you're used to getting. On the flip side, if you add a lot of fields to your form, you're going to get fewer and fewer leads just because people might get frustrated or might require too much at the moment. But if you do have a longer form, you're going to get more qualified leads. So I'm not saying that on a landing page you want to have, 4 or 5 pages the way you would for an application, because the drop-off would be way too significant there. But even if you have between, 6 to 10 different fields based on your needs and what you need to collect, that could be a good way of, again, tightening up the number of leads that come in and making sure they're a bit higher quality. And so you might want to think about this also based on what your program is. If you're offering like higher education, like a master's or a PhD, you might want to have a field about what the person's bachelor was there, just so your admission team gets it. They already have that key piece of information, and it could qualify them or not. If they say, I don't have a bachelor's, then it might be very hard to go and do that master's degree and so forth. Also, if you're advertising internationally, you might want to have some information about the person's nationality, whether they're eligible to study in your country. Maybe they might need to have a valid student visa or something like that. In some cases for language schools and work and study ones, it's worth asking what languages they speak, because maybe they just don't have the proficiency needed, or maybe they're overly proficient or things like that, just so you have a bit more information that they can help your sales team go through this. So after your form is filled, ideally, like I was saying before, you really want to make sure your page redirects users to a thank you page. So again, you could have just like a pop-up message that says thanks, or the message just loads on the page and that could be tracked. But you're really missing out on the opportunity with what you can do with a thank you page. So on the one hand, thank you page is very secure for data tracking, because only people who hit this page should have been ones who filled out the form. So you can see this sort of funnel of getting into your actual, enrollment funnel of clicking on the ad, visiting the landing page, hitting the thank you page, and your analytics, which is nice and clear. But also you can stuff all kinds of exciting information here. So, the easiest thing you do is just say, thank you for your interest. We'll get back in touch with you soon. But this example here, they actually have an application button, which is neat. So those people that might be ready to completely apply, they go in as a lead, but they also have that option right now to even go further and apply if they're feeling that way. You can also place a lot of videos here. If you have really good social media content, you can add some videos here to keep them engaged. Things that we've seen for some, international schools could be like, what's the day in the life like in the city? What's it like studying on our campus? For boarding schools, we've had, examples of what it like to board here. So you have a lot of like fun, helpful, and interesting information here in a video format that can really keep your audience engaged. And, you maybe even give them some questions they might want to ask when they speak to your admissions team. So again, it's really about maintaining their engagement. Because again, getting a lead is nice, but it's nice to have an even more qualified and engaged lead. And so one thing that probably could be reminded a bit more these days is always good to test. So testing before and testing after are very important when it comes to landing pages. I mean, you might have the most perfectly designed campaign, this beautiful landing page, and you launch it, but then you realize when people hit that submit button, nothing actually happens. So please, 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 if you're doing this yourself, test your landing pages before you make them live. Some of the most common things that go wrong is just this form submission button doesn't work. It doesn't push to the thank you page, or maybe it's not even hooked up to your CRM. So there could be anything, any little technical thing that might have been forgotten could have been forgotten. So I would strongly recommend testing yourself, but don't just test it on, one device, test it on two devices, your phone and your laptop, to make sure it works on both. If you have Chrome, that's great. That's probably the most used browser, but maybe check on Mozilla or, Safari, Opera if you have those, because again, things might function differently on different browsers. So it's really good just to check off all the boxes to make sure there's nothing here that could be impeding the utility of your landing page. If you want to get a bit more technical, one of the I guess secretly very important things is also the load speed of your page itself. So if you have Google Search Console installed, might be able to get reports on these pages if they're loading slow, and it might give you some suggestions how to fix it. Also, there's free tools like Google Page Speed Insights, where you can actually pop your page into their, I guess, the checking tool, and it'll tell you if there's any issues with the loading, both on mobile and desktop. And often what we do see fairly quite a bit is a desktop page runs fantastically, with the mobile scoring like a 10 out of 100 for usability and loading speed. And so having a lower load speed, and if it takes 5 seconds on some devices to load up your page, those people might just bounce, redo another Google search, find a competitor, and go to their very smooth loading site. And unfortunately, you've lost them. So these are things you really want to test to make sure it's sorted out before you start, you're spending your ad campaign money. Because again, it's about really maximizing the return on your investment. And these are little tips that are going to help you do that. And so there's still other testing you can also do even after pages are live. So A/B testing is very important, and the best way to do A/B tests is when you have some data. So say your page has been up for about a month, you probably have some good data you can look at in terms of how users have interacted with it. And so this is the perfect time to start doing some A/B tests. So an A/B test basically is you take the original version of the page, the A version, and you create a B version that has some sort of change to it. So it could be replacing your image with a video, adding more buttons to the form, changing your main USP, adding a detail about an internship that's very prominent on the page now. So you would make 1 or 2 changes, and then there's a lot of tools. Google offers some, but there's other suits out there where you basically would split half of your traffic, say clicks on your same ad, half will go to the A page, half will go to the B page, and then after about 2 weeks is usually a good time to gather data. You can see which one performed better with a higher conversion rate, and obviously whichever one had a higher conversion rate, better return on your investment, that's the one you'd want to go with. And then once that one is done, you can do another A/B test after that, and just keep making these sort of incremental improvements to your pages. So in some cases, maybe your page starts off great, it still doesn't hurt to do an A/B test just to see if you can make it even better. Because again, every time you make it better, that's even a stronger return on your investment. And mobile optimization, which I had mentioned a bit earlier, but it just goes that again, mobile responsive design comes with a lot of, I guess, website builders these days. So it's not as worrisome as it was 10 years ago when you need a special tool set to do this. But you really want to check again on every mobile device, see how it scrolls, see how things look. You don't want an image that's kind of broken on the side or text that's got weird spacing. And one of the issues we see a lot on landing pages has to do with forms, or maybe there's checkboxes that are really small. I guess kind of like what you're seeing in the little video thing there on the left. And these really tiny little boxes, if you have big fingers, it sucks. You might hit the wrong one and stuff like that. So do whatever you can to really make it an intuitive thing to use on a mobile phone, because again, most of your prospective students are probably on their mobile when they're interacting with your landing pages. And just one more reminder to get to our next section of presentations. Again, don't forget to track your visitors. So again, if you have your campaign is running great, you have a beautiful landing page and all this, but you're not tracking your, your progress, you're really going to be operating in the dark and not have the data you need to optimize and do better. So On the one hand, this could be data from your Google Ads or your Meta Ads. It also helps to have Google Analytics installed as sort of a second source of truth to get more details about the people visiting. But then also some of these behavioral insight tools like Hotjar, Crazy Eggs, you can see where they look, where they click, how they interact, how much time on the site. These are really useful for, again, further optimizing and maximizing the potential of your landing page. Because if you know, like here's, I guess, an example from a while ago that we had. So we had a landing page, was working with a school, and they really wanted to include the price of their tuition on there. And so we noticed the number of conversions were lower than we expected. And so we installed, I think it was Hotjar, and we got to see that on this page, almost everybody spent an inordinate amount of time on this price before bouncing. So having the price there wasn't exactly helping their cause. And when you remove that and just have that as something that's followed up with in the brochure or in the admissions call, it removes basically one of the biggest hurdles for people filling this in here. Because what we sometimes saw also in that case, and we learned, is that if you have your price on your landing page, even if it's a very good and competitive price for a program, people like to window shop. So they might go back, do some more searches, check out your competitors who do not have the price listed. And what do? They fill in that form to find out what it is, and now they're a lead in their system. So you get to learn a lot of things like this when you dive a little bit deeper into the analytics of what your visitors are doing in your pages. So when we talk a bit more about tracking on a landing page, there's really two sides to it. There's the front end, which again is about what happens when they click their ads, hit your page, go to your thank you page, and what your visitors are doing. And then there's the back end side of things, which is everything that happens after they've got into your top of your funnel for your enrollments. So the two sides of this, for obviously the best results, you want to have these both set up in a very robust way that gives your team the insights and the data they need to be able to understand the performance and how to make changes to your performance. And with the landing pages, obviously sort of the middle, that's kind of binding these two things together, these two halves. And so this brings us up to just our second poll of the day. So if you've been doing work on analytics and tracking, which do you find more challenging? Was it your front end tracking, your back end? Both are equally challenging, or maybe you don't have experience in this area, and that's perfectly fine as well. Give everybody just maybe 10 more seconds to go through this. And sorry if I cough again during this webinar. I've had this cough that just will not go away since the start of December, which I'm sure, unfortunately, a lot of people have had. The weather's been really weird around here lately. So a lot of answers are trickling in. I think we'll just give it one more second and then close it over here. And there we go. So looks like a few people have some issues on the front end tracking. Again, that's fine. That's perfectly normal. A bit more on the back end. And then quite a bit also have no experience in this area or equally challenging. So I guess one of the takeaways from here is that we do acknowledge there are some difficulties in tracking. So I guess, yeah, we've got a bit of work to do here. We'll talk about a few things together today. There we go. So there wasn't a lot of you that talked about front end being a challenge, but just to dive into it all the same. So front end, there's probably be a lot of pieces that go into your tracking setup. If you're running on Google, I mean, Google has tons of different pixels and tags that sometimes it can get confusing for people. I mean, Google Ads has its own conversion tag. There's Google Tag Manager, which is another way to deploy tags. There's GA4 and all these. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the larger Google suite, but these are really robust tools and they're largely free. So if you don't have any of them, I would strongly recommend looking into them because they can really give you that added insight into what's going on. And nowadays, I mean, everybody had to switch over to GA4 from the older UA, which is not as intuitive as it has been in the past, especially setting up things like conversion tracking. But if you're able to get these set up, you can again have multiple layers to review. So for instance, if you're seeing weird data in your Google Ads, if you have Google Analytics as well, that can be a second way of seeing if maybe there's something wrong with your tracking or actually something wrong with your campaigns. When we talk about front-end analytics, there's a lot of metrics you can track, things like bounce rate, time on site, impressions, things like that. But those realistically don't matter too much as far as I'm concerned. When we're talking about a paid ad campaign, a landing page, you really just want to focus on the metrics that matter the most, which is understanding how you're getting your conversions, how you're getting your leads, how much is it costing for these leads, what's the conversion rate percentage on your landing page. If you have multiple versions of the landing page, which one has the highest conversion rate and things like that. Those are the metrics you really want to focus on that really help you understand your ROI. And what's also nice with the front end is that you can do some things here that will actually help influence what's going on in the back end. So if you have UTM parameters or any other sort of parameters added to your ad, sorry about that. A parameter, if you're looking at, say, your web browser, where like google.com, is anything that comes after a question mark in it. So it could be like google.com question mark UTM source equals blah, 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 blah. That whole string of what looks kind of sometimes like non-sequential text is a parameter. And those really exist as ways of telling your tracking tools, whether it's Google Analytics or even your CRM, more information about particular visitors and clicks. So if you're deploying parameters correctly, which you can do this through Google Ads or manually add them in Meta ads or LinkedIn ads and things like that, you're really giving a whole bunch of extra information to your analytical tools to say, it could be things like, this is the campaign this person came from. This is the landing page they visited. This is the keyword they clicked or the ad group. And really any sort of data you want, you kind of sneak it into your parameters so that as long as you're using a robust CRM, that can sort of pre-populate it. So when your lead comes in, you have, first name, last name, email, program of interest. You might also be able to see here, which campaign, what landing page, and all of this. And as you have more people going through your CRM, you can really see where they drop off if there's commonalities, like people who clicked on this keyword, they're all becoming students, this keyword, nobody. Maybe not as dramatic as that, but you'll be able to see a lot more insights into there so the two parts of your analytics can work together. And also when you're using analytics, probably what a lot of you have noticed if you looked at GA4 these days is it's not as easy to dive into as some of the older analytics that Google offers. So they do have another tool called Google Data Studio or Looker Studio, depending on which version it is, which is what we actually use quite a lot here at HCM, where basically it just plugs right into your Google Suite and it pulls a lot of data for you. So the example that we have here is plugged into Google Ads. So it's sort of like a custom dashboard where you can just see all of your campaigns at a glance without having to log into the account. It loads very fast and has a lot of the key metrics kind of visible. So things like this can be set up also to really make all of your front end analytics, pulled into one place so you can have a very clear glimpse of them. You can see at a glance which your top performing campaigns are, your lowest performing. Depending on how you set it up, you can even have your landing pages there by traffic and lots of information on these things. And in terms of backend analytics, so we just took a few quick screenshots earlier today about, some glances this is from Mautic, which is one of the CRMs we use a lot here at HCM with a lot of clients. And so what's great about a lot of these CRMs is that when people show up, obviously you have your list of all the leads coming in, but there's different things here about how to score them to see their progress. So the stage column is really important because we can see that some people marked not interested. Obviously, you don't need to focus too much on them anymore. You can see the progress of other people who had a call attempt or an email attempt. Some were contacted. Some have got their first meetings booked. A lot of them in the second table below, we can see that they even completed their application. And so having your CRM really well integrated with your landing page, even your front-end analytics, just gives your admissions team tons of information to work with. And what's really good is if you start to take the time after to pull reports, who has time for anything these days, but if you're able to go and do this, pull some reports, you can again look for commonalities. And these are things that you might be able to find here that can also influence your landing page. So again, maybe people from this region are dropping off for some reason. Maybe you don't want to target them anymore. Maybe you're seeing, if there's in the notes, your sales team is just like, I wish we had asked them what they studied previously. So these are things you can add questions to your landing page. Maybe in your case, people want to know the price earlier. So maybe you should put that or test it on your landing page. So there's a lot of information in here. And the more you dive into it, the more you might be able to, again, optimize that middle tying piece, your landing page with all of this and just make it easier for everything afterwards in your funnel. So we're getting close to the end and we're getting close to our time. So I'll try to go a bit quickly in some of the last things here. If you missed something here, you want to read more, these slides will be given out. I believe we'll be emailing them out tomorrow. So you'll all have access to these. So no worries if we end up skimming across a few things. So this one is just sort of, a rebuttal to things we've said on past webinars. So in the past year, I've talked a lot about how in general with Meta or Facebook, you do not want to use a landing page. And the reason historically that I've said that was because Meta and Apple have had sort of a beef, and that there's a lot of problems with the tracking of Apple users, so that if people click on an iPhone on an ad on Facebook and your landing page, there's a pretty good chance it'll be hard to track, and you would have a lot of weird campaign data. So we kind of tried to work around that by using the lead forms in Facebook, which is also very easy to fill out. But now there's been a lot of developments. And they're really like the crux of what it is Facebook has something called the conversion API, which is server-side tracking, which is sort of a way to future-proof your analytics. And this is very effective. And using this can effectively go around a lot of those problems that we had with social media tracking before. So I think even in the past year or two, I've been talking a lot about getting rid of landing pages. We now have a good reason to go back to them for social media. So again, for Google, landing pages have been great the whole time, but Facebook has had a lot of problems with them in some of lead generation. And so now it looks like this year it's going to be much more viable. So again, these fantastic landing pages that we're all optimizing, we can just send more traffic to there without really worrying that we're not going to be able to keep track of them. That's the short and simple of it. But the other important thing that you can do with these landing pages, so even if you don't have a large presence on, say, Facebook or TikTok or other social media, you can still tag all of your landing pages with their pixels and do some cross-channel remarketing. So for instance, say you have Google traffic going to a landing page, tag it with your Facebook pixel, which then you can build an audience on Facebook. So all the people that visit your landing page but did not convert, you can start showing them ads again on Facebook. So really focus on these people that have already engaged with you and showed interest, but just didn't follow through previously. And so our last little section is just some considerations for international recruitment. So obviously, if you're targeting students locally and internationally, there's some different considerations you would want to do at the campaign level, but also at your landing page level. So landing pages that are designed for students from elsewhere, you're probably going to want to include different sections and details, that really highlight that, you're not in their location. So for instance, if you're a school in France targeting the Middle East, you're probably going to want to mention things like study in France or our beautiful campus in Paris and things like that, which might not be as self-evident if they're just seeing this ad and think it's, something down the street. You also want to maybe pay attention to language, particularly with English. Different regions of the world have different spelling for a lot of English words. Program is probably one of the most notorious. In British English, it's how it's spelled here. But in American English, Canadian English, and a lot of places, it's used differently. So if, say, you're an American school targeting, users in the UK, you might want to consider adopting some UK English. Or for American campus in Europe, you might have to decide whether you use British Standard or American Standard and so forth. But again, it's really just about knowing who your audience is. But probably more importantly, when you're doing a landing page, is really to adjust it as much as you can, tailor it to people from this other culture and setting. So some things you might want to consider is launching landing pages in different languages. So maybe you operate in English, but you're targeting students in Colombia. It could be worth it having a Spanish language landing page. But again, this goes with another saying we've talked about in paid ads, is that if you offer any material in other language, it probably helps if you have somebody on your missions team that can respond in that language as well. So it certainly makes it much more easier to interact with it. But if you interact with a lot of Spanish language content and nobody in your team speaks Spanish, it might be a bit of a put away for those people when they actually get in touch with their team. So if you can support the other languages, by all means, roll those out as well. Also, it's good to have different trust signals there that really highlight, your school is credible. It could be some, awards or accreditations could be there. Those are very good to have as well. If you're doing, say, a language school or like a study exchange, you might want to have information about how to stay in your city, what it's like to rent there or live there, if you have boarding options. If you offer internships for people from select countries, things like this are really good USPs to have. So really, you probably want to take a lot of what you have of your good content, but really tweak it for somebody that not only is interested in your school, but also interested in your location, because that's often a good seller. I mean, even if this sort of example here, this is about school in Paris, is a picture of the Eiffel Tower, so like cultural landmarks that everybody recognizes. Even these little cues and symbols are still just nice things that people associate with it. Which can, again, increase your conversion rate as long as people feel comfortable and, trusting of what they're seeing on your pages here. So we're just about out of time. So I'll quickly just run through our key takeaways and try to get to some of these questions. So if there's 6 things I want you to take away from our talk today is 1, the importance of mobile advertising. Make sure your landing pages are mobile friendly. 2, your program pages are not landing pages. Both of these are awesome resources, but they serve different purposes. 3, spend a lot of time optimizing your forms. Consider adding or removing fields based on your needs for quality versus quantity. Analytics are really key for optimizing and making insights. If you don't see what your people or your visitors are doing, if you don't see what those in your enrollment funnel are doing, it'd be really hard to make changes without knowing whether you're making the right choice or not. There's a lot of changes happening with social media marketing, easier to track visitors on landing pages, and we can also do cross-channel remarketing efforts. And lastly, it helps to have some cultural specificity and added trust signals for your international audiences. And so that wraps up the main content of our webinar. I suppose our final plug at the end, we, HEM, are an advertising agency as well as consultants. If you have questions about landing pages or need some help getting yours set up, by all means, don't be shy to reach out to us. We have a number of contacts here in North America and elsewhere. So depending on your region, you might be talking to one of these lovely people over here. And so in our final moments, I'm just going to pull up our questions and see what I have over here. So we have quite a bit. I don't know if I have time to share all of these. So some I think I can go through quickly. So just some people asking about the slides. Yes, they will be shared ideally tomorrow morning. Any stats or thoughts on the form and page versus a button to click on? So having a button to click on that's prominent is better than one that's hidden, but a form on page in every test that we've done works better than the button to click. So filling in the form right there, people see it, they know what they have to do. And if there's a button that clicks to another page, it's sometimes just one more step that they can drop off of, which ideally you want them just to get that form filled in as quickly and as simply as possible. Buttons sometimes are necessary if tracking is hard to set up based on your form provider, where it just doesn't let us do it the other way. But ideally, form open on page is the way to go. Somebody wrote, oops, so it wasn't actually a question. Is there a cost involved in installing the Facebook conversion API? So Facebook conversion API can be installed if you do it all in-house for free. If you do it sort of the rough hard coding route, there's some tutorials on how to do that. What you'll notice is if you go through the documentation, though, Facebook's really trying to get you to go through some paid options. So it really tries to get you signed up to either a cloud service, or if you try to do it through Google Tag Manager, it also points you towards cloud service, which have really fairly high fees. It's probably a very easy way to do it, but it ends up being like $120, $500 a month for something you probably don't need to be paying unless you have major volume. Otherwise, you'd probably need a skilled developer to be able to install this. And in some cases, I think in WordPress, if you're using that site, there's some plugins that can alleviate some of it. So there's a few ways of getting the conversion API installed. I guess it depends on your technical expertise as well as your budget for it. And do I have one more I can do? Is there a CRM you recommend? So with HEM, probably the two CRMs we work with the most and would recommend would be Mautic, which is, again, is maybe not the most aged of the CRM. So it's very sleek, very new, very easy to use, but doesn't have a lot of features as some of the more long-standing ones. HubSpot's a very good CRM, but it also has a fairly high, I guess, ceiling to learn how to use it effectively. It also has a much higher price than some of the other options. And beyond that, I know a lot of schools in North America and Canada use Campus Login, which has a lot of features, but it's a bit clunky. And there's other ones out there too. But again, if you're ever curious about CRMs, we can help with some consulting and things like that as well. And unfortunately, there's a few more questions, but I'm over my time. So I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. These slides will be emailed out. And if you ever need to get in touch with us, there's going to be a whole bunch of contacts at the back of this deck. If you need help with anything, we'd be happy to have at least a sit down and a chat. So with that, I'll let you all go and enjoy the rest of your day.